Alright, this video is how I do my personal reflections, part 2. In the previous video, I talked about why I do my personal reflections, and I talked about different categories of topics that I like to think about while doing my personal reflections, and I talked about what I want to get from personal reflections and why the different topics that I mentioned are important to me and what they mean to me. And so for this video, I want to talk about my personal reflection questions as well as the negative things that can occur if I don't do my personal reflections often enough. And if I have enough time, then I want to talk about tips that I have came up with related to the topic of personal reflections. And so, where I'm at currently with my notes, if you saw that piece of paper being flipped over, that's my notes. Where I'm at currently with my notes, I am about halfway through the first page, so I find it very interesting that notes that took up about half a page resulted in a 30-minute video, but it happened, and I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but anyways, moving on to talking about my personal reflection questions. These questions were actually based off of questions that I had put in a certain section in the Notes app on my phone, but I modified the questions and removed some of them. And that is how I came up with the questions that I have on my notes, or in my notes. I'm not sure what's grammatically correct. I don't really care. Why am I even mentioning that? Anyways, I don't know if the ordering of these questions are... I'm not certain of the priority of the questions and which ones are arguably more important than the others. I've just written them down in this order based off of the order I had similar questions in that certain section in the Notes app on my phone. I have the ordering of these questions that are written down in my notes based off of the order of those questions that these questions are based off of, and I also thought up of some more questions as I was trying to write down these notes. First question is, what did I learn today? That question is important to me because I want to make sure that I am learning things, and learning requires retention. So in order to remember things, you need to be able to have enough repetition. And so reflection results in more repetition, which increases your chances of remembering something. And that applies with things that you have learned. And so taking notes actually can help you with that repetition that results in improving your memory. And so it's important that there is a way that you can reflect about things that you have learned. That way you're more likely to be able to remember them. And also, I really enjoy learning, especially things that are useful to me. Second question, and I did not number these, so anyways, second question: what milestones and or progress did I make recently? Now, it's important to keep track of milestones because milestones can help you feel like you've made a lot of major progress. And also, they can be interesting things that stand out in your memory. Progress is important because if you want to make progress with your goals, then it's important to keep track of it and make sure that it's measurable so that you can be more likely to stick with your goals and not give up on them. If you notice that you're not making much progress despite your efforts to try to make progress, then that may discourage you. And if you think you're not making much progress simply because you can't remember making the progress, then you may think that you didn't make much progress, and so then you may be discouraged to continue pursuing whatever goal it is that you're trying to pursue. And so by being able to remember and keep track of that progress, it helps you to be able to remember that progress that you've made so that you're less likely to be discouraged away from trying to accomplish your goals. And also, us human beings tend to want to have more immediate rewards as a result of completing tasks. And so if you don't get those rewards, no matter what form they may be in, you may end up lacking the motivation to continue pursuing your goals. And so taking satisfaction and noticing that you have made progress towards your goals actually helps you to be able to have more motivation to continue pursuing them. The third question is, what roles did certain things play out in my life? Now, I like to try to analyze things that happen in my life, and I like to try to figure out the purpose of things and how they affect me and how they may have been important. And if they are negative things, I may try to think about and figure out how to prevent them from happening again, and how I can make peace with what has happened. And I also like to think about the role that different people play in my life, because I like to be able to be appreciative of the help that I receive from other people, and I like to be appreciative of them showing that they care about me. And so I want my interactions with people to be more peaceful, and I also want to be able to have strong bonds with my friends and family. And so in order to do that, I have to be mindful about the roles that those people play in my life and also the role that I play in their lives. And my fourth question is, what are my plans? I like to plan out things ahead of time. I like to try not to overthink my plans. I like to come up with plans that are detailed enough, but not too detailed. I don't like to spend too much time on coming up with plans. I like to, for certain plans, wait until I get, or for certain plans, I like to wait until it gets closer to the time to actually carry out whatever the plan is, because I don't want to plan too far ahead when I don't know enough information to be able to make those decisions as reasonable as I would like to be able to make them. And so I want to make sure I have enough information before I plan out certain things, because I don't want to come up with some plan that isn't ready yet because of not knowing enough information yet, and then forget to modify it when I get more information, and then I don't want to end up trying to follow a plan that doesn't work. And it also makes me feel better to come up with plans, because it helps me have the feeling that I'm in control of my own life when I can try to plan it out. It also helps me notice patterns and remember things better, because I'm organizing things in my mind and in my notes better. My fifth question is, what are my concerns? So it's important to think about what I'm worrying about, what I'm concerned about, and what things bother me. It's important for me to weigh the pros and cons of things that happen in my life, because I want to be able to do something about the bad things and make my life not as stressful, and I like to make my life more peaceful and more enjoyable. So in order to do that, I have to try to do what I can to prevent my life from falling apart. And so I have to think about my concerns and not ignore them, because I don't want to let negative emotions pile up and result in me being overwhelmed by them and having certain issues as a result of that happening, like low energy, burnout, meltdowns, panic attacks, whatever. I don't want those things to happen. So I have to think about what bothers me and how it affects me and what I can do about it. My sixth question is, am I satisfied or at least at peace with what happened? Now, I want to have satisfaction about what happens in my life in the form of me not having regrets. I don't want to end up having to have regrets or much guilt about things, and so I have to understand why I did certain things or said certain things. I have to understand why certain things occur and why somebody said something or did something, because I want to be able to not play the blame game, and I also don't want to blindly assume something is going on that may not be occurring. And I want to be able to have better judgment when assessing situations by having less bias. And so I have to make sure that I take satisfaction in the good things that happen, but also keep in mind that certain bad things happened and good things might be able to come out of those bad things, because most things, like I already said in the previous video, are not entirely good or entirely bad. There's bad things that can come out of things that seem like good things. There's also good things that can come out of things that seem like bad things. I have to try to be mindful of that to allow myself to be able to be at peace with those things. I also want to be able to reflect about the things that have happened in general, because I want to be able to remember the important things. I also don't want too many memories or too much information pile up in my mind and overwhelm me and stress me out and distract me. I don't want my mind to be overloaded. I don't want to have to deal with sensory overload. And I really don't want to have panic attacks. I do not like panic attacks. I don't think anybody would like a panic attack. So, I gotta be very careful with how I manage my stress. The seventh question is, do I understand why things happened the way that they did? I already mentioned that with the previous question unintentionally, but I can say that understanding why things happen the way that they happen helps you to be at peace with them. And it also helps you to understand a lot more things about life. It helps you to learn a lot of important things. Now I'm flipping over to the other side of the paper. So, that last question, the 8th question, if I'm remembering correctly, what am I grateful for? I want to take satisfaction in the good things, like I've already said. I want to be grateful for both good things, as far as things that I think are really good, but also good things that come out of bad things I also want to be grateful for. So in a sense, I may have to be grateful for bad things at times because of the good things that come out of them and because of the things that I learn from those bad experiences. And when I say bad like that, or good like that, or something similar to how I sounded when I said that, I'm meaning it in a way that I'm not saying that something is entirely good or bad. I'm saying that it has good things about it and bad things about it. It may seem to me that certain things lean more towards good or more towards bad, but in reality, they both have most of those things, both, if not all of those things, have both good and bad in them. Or, I guess you could say, positive and negative consequences as a result of something that occurs. Or positive and negative qualities. Anyways, the next section I have for this video is what negative things might happen if I don't do my personal reflections often enough. Now, I've already talked about my memory problems, and so if you don't reflect often enough about certain things, then it becomes harder to remember them. your mind gets overwhelmed by trying to hold on to too many things. And so when you have low energy as a result of that stress building up and the sensory overload occurring, when you have low energy as a result of those things, then you suffer from brain fog. And that makes it hard for you to think clearly, and it makes it harder for you to be able to focus and remember things. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that the memories are permanently gone. However, your brain is making it more difficult for you to access them because your brain doesn't have enough energy for that at that point in time. And so the memories may come back to you later. You may be able to remember them later once you recover from that stress. But when brain fog makes certain memories inaccessible, that does not necessarily mean that they are permanently gone. And unfortunately, they may come back to you at an inconvenient time when those memories might not seem relevant anymore. Like, you may be trying to remember something very important, and then you may remember it at random in the middle of the night, or at any inconvenient time in which that information may not be able to help you out anymore. And then it may come up in conversation to where all of a sudden you're like, oh, I remember that one thing that I was gonna say, and then the person may be confused and be wondering, okay, I don't know what's going on with their mind, but that was weird. Had things like that happen in many conversations before, where I've just changed the subject out of nowhere based on something that I remembered from quite a while back. Anyways, another bad thing or negative thing that can happen from not doing your personal reflections often enough: low self-esteem. So I've suffered with a thing known as self-hate, where I end up pushing myself too far and I end up being too hard on myself or too strict with myself, which results in me having extra unnecessary stress. And so sometimes I end up being too picky about what I do, and I end up overthinking things and getting mad at myself for making certain mistakes rather than being forgiving of myself. And so that causes me an extra unnecessary stress, which makes life more difficult for me because low energy. And so I end up lacking confidence and end up being unable at times to trust myself because I end up being impatient with myself and getting mad at myself. And so I have to be mindful of a lot of things by reflecting on them so that I can be more forgiving of myself. If I make peace with things, it is easier for me to be forgiving of myself because understanding. And so confusion can happen if you don't do your personal reflections often enough. That has to do with memory problems. You may get confused because your brain ends up making certain mistakes, or brain fog may result in you being unable to properly interpret information, such as somebody trying to explain something to you. You may be so stressed out and so tired that it may be difficult for you to understand what somebody is trying to explain to you. And so trying to force yourself to interpret it when you have low energy can result in you getting frustrated and impatient, and the other person can end up getting frustrated at you and impatient with you as well. So reflecting often enough helps reduce the likelihood of brain fog to make you less likely to become confused. Burnout is another negative thing that can happen if you don't do personal reflections often enough. And like I said already in a previous video, burnout involves a person becoming tired and overwhelmed and having a lot of stress due to using up an excess of energy, usually from work, and if you don't do your reflections often enough, with your memory not being as good as you would like it to be, that can make it difficult to do things, and so that can result in burnout, because if you get behind because of being too slow, then it contributes to more frustration, more periods of time where you try to catch up and use more excess energy, and then the burnout gets even worse and you feel even worse and your life becomes harder and harder, and it keeps getting worse as long as you are prevented from getting enough rest. And so we need to take the time to get proper rest and make ourselves at peace with things by doing reflections as peacefully as we can. And so overthinking is another negative thing that can happen from not doing your personal reflections often enough. And so if your memory doesn't work as well as you would like it to, you may not remember enough of the important details when trying to go about solving an issue, and so you may end up overthinking things because you may feel like you're stuck in a loop. You may feel like you are trapped and unable to make a decision because there's not enough information there, because brain fog prevents you from accessing it, so it makes it difficult for you to trust your ability to make decisions. And it also contributes to you being more stressed out and tired. I already mentioned tiredness. I have that on this list as well. Headaches. If you don't do your personal reflections often enough, you can get headaches because of your mind being overloaded. So that has to do with sensory overload and burnout. I already mentioned that. Brain fog can make it difficult to remember things. So when you're trying really hard to remember things, that can result in you getting a headache, especially when you get angry at yourself and impatient with yourself. I already mentioned sensory overload. That's when your mind ends up taking in more information than it knows what to do with, so then it causes you physical and mental pain. Another thing on the list is more frequent and more intense tics. That applies to me because I have an issue with tics. I do not have a diagnosed tic disorder at the moment. I am undiagnosed, but I do have tics that I have to deal with. And so when I am more tired and when I experience a lot of stress, it makes the tics more likely to happen, and the tics are both verbal and, I guess, mechanical, I think it's called. So movement or physical tics and verbal vocal tics, meaning words, spoken words, sounds, whatever. Those kind of tics are more likely to happen when I'm under a lot of stress, and so those tics can get me in trouble because they may force me to say things that might get me into trouble. I'm not going to go into detail about that for obvious reasons. And then the last thing I have on the list is low energy. We don't like having low energy. We don't like being tired. Anyways, I have more things in my notes, and I do not have enough time to talk about the rest of it in this video, so I'll actually have to make a part 3. And so, wow, over an hour worth of stuff from two sides of a piece of paper filled with notes. Wow. I did not expect that when I came up with the plans for this video, but it happened. So anyways, hopefully I won't have too much of an issue trying to make part 3. So that's it for this video. Peace.